So we ask ourselves, where does self-concept come from? We know that every child comes into the world with no self-concept at all. That every single idea, every single attitude, value, feeling, belief that we have as adults, we did not have when we were born. That every single concept that we have of who we really are, we had to learn during the course of growing up. That each child comes into the world as pure potential, like a complete white sheet or a white slate with nothing written on it. And that a child, in terms of self-concept, can develop and go in any direction depending upon what happens to them after they're born. We know that when the child is born, the child has an extremely high need for love and touching. The child comes into the world as pure sensation, and the child begins to develop their sense of self by the way he or she is responded to by their parents. A child learns whether or not he or she is lovable or acceptable or worthwhile or funny or intelligent or talented or capable by the way he or she is treated by their parents. It is impossible to give a child too much love in the formative years. Children need a constant, continuous flow of high-quality love in order to develop healthy personality. Some of the old school ideas that let the child cry or you'll spoil him, spare the rod and spoil the child, children should be seen and not heard. These ideas were and are, if you like, prehistoric notions of child raising. The fact is that we know today that children need love as much as they need food, as much as they need shelter, as much as they need clothing. In several experiments that took place, they took children who were born and placed in state hospitals and divided them into two groups. One group of children was given continual holding, talking, touching, loving, singing, warmth, support. The second group of children had their diapers changed and were given bottles, but were never spoken to, were never held, were never sung to, and received no emotional support at all. In one experiment, which had to be stopped, and it was stopped too late, 90% of the children in the second group actually shriveled up and died of grief within the first 90 days after birth. This has been called the infant grief death syndrome. The need for love is so crucial that we know that all of healthy personality is based on it. We know that the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of a child's life are absolutely the most crucial for laying down adult personality. That almost all psychosis, all totally, if you like, uncurable mental illness can be traced back to a breakdown of the flow of love in the first year of life. That if the flow of love breaks down in the second year or the third year or the fourth year, it will cause serious personality problems, neurosis, sometimes psychosis, schizophrenia, behavioral problems, and personality disorders. But if a child has an unbroken flow of high-quality love in the first 3 to 5 years, the child will be set down on a solid foundation and will be able to go on to realize their full potential. If a child does not receive high-quality love in the first 3 to 5 years, the child will develop what Abraham Maslow called deficiency needs. Children who are deprived of love also have the same psychological deficiencies, and for the rest of their lives, they spend much of their time trying to compensate for their deficiencies rather than realizing their potentials as human beings. We know that the child is born with two marvelous characteristics. The first characteristic is that every child is born fearless. Every child is born totally unafraid. In fact, when a child comes into the world, they only have two fears. One is the fear of falling, the other is the fear of loud noises. All other fears that a child learns, all adult fears that we have to be taught to us as children and taught to us over and over again by a process of repetition. The fearlessness of the child is characterized by the words, I can. I can do anything. Children are totally unafraid of trying anything. Anybody who's ever raised a small child to the age of 4 or 5 knows that you have to spend the first few years of their life stopping them from killing themselves. Children are totally suicidal. They're kamikaze. They're totally unafraid of anything. They'll throw themselves off of heights. They'll run out into traffic. They'll sit on hot stoves. They do not know enough to fear anything. Our natural state of nature is to come into the world with no fears at all. And when we look at the fears that are the great robbers of our adult lives, we must remember that every single fear that we suffer as adults we learned after birth. The second characteristic that children have is that they're born totally spontaneous, completely uninhibited, which is characterized by the words, I don't have to. Children feel that they don't have to do anything, that they can do anything they want and they don't have to do anything they don't want. What is the first word that a child learns? It's no. And the second word a child learns is don't. And who teaches the child those words? The parents, by saying no and don't continually. The child learns very early that I don't have to do anything. They laugh, they cry, they throw themselves on the floor, they have tantrums, they suit themselves completely. Our natural state of nature is to be completely unafraid and completely uninhibited in our relationships with ourselves and with other people. Also, that children learn two ways in the formative years. The first way they learn is by imitation, usually of one or both parents. And if one parent is more dominant than the other, then the child imitates the dominant parent. And many of our adult habit patterns and characteristics come from straight imitation of one of our parents in our formative years. Many of the characteristics we say, like father, like son, like mother, like daughter, it's very, very true. Many of our beliefs, many of our attitudes, many of our values as adults were simply imitated totally and without change from the way our parents thought and acted and behaved during our formative years. The other way that children learn in the formative years is by moving from discomfort toward comfort. And these two ways, imitation and moving from discomfort toward comfort, are the key ways that we learn throughout life. Of all the discomforts that a child can suffer, the most traumatic of all is the withdrawal or the threat of the withdrawal of love and approval from the parent. If the parent threatens to withdraw love or withholds love, the child actually suffers psychic trauma. There is nothing more terrifying to a child than to think that his or her mommy or daddy does not love them. Children need love so desperately that if parents use the threat of the withdrawal of love, what we call love deprivation or love withheld, children will very soon lose their natural spontaneity, their natural fearlessness, and they will do everything possible to conform to the wishes or the demands of their mommy and daddy so as not to suffer that incredibly terrifying discomfort of loss of love. Children need that love so badly that they will do anything to get it. And when parents mistakenly use love withdrawal or love deprivation to manipulate their children's behavior, they find a very interesting thing. It works very well. Throughout the generations, parents have found that if you withdraw love or use love as a tool to manipulate your children's behavior, it's very effective. But the great tragedy is that it causes psychic trauma and deep psychological scars that then manifest themselves in adult lives and create deficiencies that adults spend the rest of their lives trying to compensate for. Let me explain. Very early in life, usually by the age of 2 to 2.5, as the result of mistakes that parents make in upbringing, especially destructive criticism and physical punishment, children begin to learn negative habit patterns, which then carry over into adult life. Negative habit patterns are always learned as a result of fear, as a result of the repetition of a process of fear, punishment, destructive criticism that causes the child psychic discomfort, if you like, and often psychic trauma. Very severe punishment, very severe traumatic events can cause children to carry negative habit patterns into adult life that actually require psychotherapy and counseling to overcome. But the basic negative habit patterns that children learn and children develop that we are all subject to in our society because of the way we've been raised are, first of all, the inhibitive negative habit pattern. Now, an inhibitive negative habit pattern is characterized by the words, I can't, and is caused when children are subjected to punishment and are told over and over again, don't, get away from there, stop that, leave it alone, put that down, don't touch that. How many times have I told you, leave that alone? When the child, who is naturally curious and spontaneous and interested and who wants to touch and taste and feel and get into things, doesn't understand that the parent is being inconvenienced or understand that they're breaking something or damaging something that causes expense to the parent. All the child understands is that whenever I try to touch or taste or smell or feel or get into something new or different, my mommy or daddy get angry, they don't love me, they spank me, they criticize me, they punish me. It must be because I'm too small. It must be because I'm incompetent, I'm incapable. I can't. Later on in life, when the child or the adult is asked to do something that entails risk or involvement or trying something new or different, the instinctive reaction is, I can't. And you can tell when you are in the grip of a negative habit pattern, because all negative habit patterns are manifested physically. You can feel them in the physical body, and the inhibitive negative habit pattern is manifested down the front part of the body. The first place you feel the inhibitive negative habit pattern is in the solar plexus, when your solar plexus tightens up and your stomach starts going queasy, and sometimes your heart rate speeds up and your respiratory rate speeds up. Sometimes your throat gets tense. Sometimes you get inflamed sinuses or headaches in the front part of the head. Sometimes your bladder releases and you have to run to the bathroom. The inhibitive negative habit pattern causes us an irrational feeling of fear and anxiety and trembling that is not based on external stimuli. The inhibitive negative habit pattern leads very early in life to what we call the fear of failure. And the fear of failure is the greatest single obstacle to success in adult life. The fear of failure is what holds more people back from exploring their full potential than any other negative habit pattern or any other factor in human personality. This fear of failure is what arises inside of us whenever we are given an opportunity to risk our time or our money or our emotion. We feel immediately, I can't. The second type of negative habit pattern that we are heir to is what we call the compulsive negative habit pattern. And the compulsive negative habit pattern is characterized by the words, I have to, and is learned by the child when the child is made the recipient or the victim of what we call conditional love. When the child is told over and over again, you'd better or else. If you don't, you're going to get it. Now look what you've done. You're in big trouble now. Or when the child does something or doesn't do something and the parents use the giving of love or the withholding of love as a tool to manipulate the child's behavior. The child subjected to this does not understand what is going on. The child is pure sensation, and the child only thinks, I am of no worth and value in and of myself. I am not safe and I am not secure, and my mommy and daddy don't love me unless I am doing what they approve of. Therefore, I have to win my mommy's and daddy's approval. I have to do what they want me to do. I have to please them. I have to conform to what they expect of me. This compulsive negative habit pattern leads very early in life to what we call the fear of rejection. The fear of rejection is demonstrated or manifested in an adult life by a preoccupation or an obsession with what other people think. We get to the point where we think continually, how are other people going to react? What will they say? What will they do? What did they mean by that? Why did they look at me like that? And throughout our lives, these two negative habit patterns, the inhibitive, I can't, and the compulsive, I have to. And then the very worst of all, which is the double negative habit pattern, I can't, but I have to. I have to, but I can't. We feel driven to perform and we feel afraid to try. And we're caught in a negative bind. And these two negative habit patterns, I think, account for most of the failure that adults experience throughout the course of their lives. I feel that more adults have been held back from realizing their full potential as human beings by these two fears than by all the other fears combined in our psychological lexicon. We also know that it is destructive criticism predominantly that causes our negative habit patterns, that destructive criticism coming by someone having prestige to the child invariably lowers the child's level of self-esteem and the child's self-concept, that all destructive criticism decreases the child's ability to perform in a particular area. And children who have been severely criticized at a young age grow up to be hypersensitive as adults and become totally incapable of taking any criticism at all. Mostly when destructive criticism is used, the implicit suggestion is that if I criticize this person or this child or this employee, they're going to smarten up and fly right and do it better. We know from exhaustive research in behavioral psychology that when people are continually criticized for a particular type of action, they do not do the action better. What they do is they cease from engaging in the action completely. When you use destructive criticism on an employee, you so dramatically decrease their effectiveness that you are still paying the full salary or full remuneration to the employee, but what they have to contribute to the company is vastly diminished. Remember that negative habit patterns are conditioned responses to stimuli. They require a pattern of repetition over and over again, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of times for them to become firmly ingrained. And we can overcome negative habit patterns by beginning to feed our minds with new thoughts. And the most powerful thought we can use, of course, is I like myself.